Hello, everyone. So, on this next episode of the podcast, we have John Crosby, the Vice President of Operations at GRLabel. And John's the first label converter on the podcast, so trailblazing from that standpoint. And John talks about his journey in towards zero landfill. So, he's really a leader in sustainability in our industry. And so, really happy to have him on. We go over metrics in sustainability that he's been tracking and since the beginning of his journey, some standards and certifications out there around sustainability, and talk about kind of the market and the end user adoption all around sustainability. So this is a great podcast for anybody in sustainability or OEM product teams looking to understand how they can incorporate more sustainable products into their product stack. So that's it. I bring you John Crosby from GRLabel. Thanks, everyone. Hello, everyone, again. Thanks for listening in and tuning in for another podcast episode here on the Better Product Solutions podcast. And excited to bring John Crosby from GRLabel on the podcast. So, John, I'll let you introduce yourself, your title here, Vice President of Operations, GRLabel. And I'm excited to have you on because we're trailblazing here. You're trailblazing because up to this point, I've had, material suppliers and a couple Tapeconians, within our organization, but I haven't yet had a label converter on. So you're the first of that. So happy to have you on. And I guess just give you the softball. Tell us about yourself and your role at GRLabel.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Super glad to be here. Glad to be the first converter on the series. So John Crosby, Grand Rapids Label. I am in my 28th year with the company, and I'm Vice President of Operations. So I oversee all the operations here. And then I'm probably our lead champion on sustainability as well. And I know what we're going to talk a lot about today. We're not experts, but we have a journey and a story to tell. And I think that's about it for now. I guess I'll add, I also am a part owner, right? I'm a family member. We're a fourth generation business, and I am a family member as well. So part of the ownership group.
Yeah, for sure. And I, of course, met you, Tapecon's a recent new member of TLMI, and I joined TLMI because several people told me, hey, that's where the action is. At the committee level is where the action is. And of course, you and I met at that committee summit. And I knew right off the bat, I think, your activity, your involvement in the sustainability, I guess, aspect of TLMI has been really big. And just me meeting you, I knew right away that you were, leading in the space, way ahead of the game. I started scouting your website, I think, at the TLMI event, like, what's this company up to? And was immediately impressed. And so the zero landfill journey, of course, sticks right out. And that's why I was really excited to have you on. So, so tell the story, of the company's journey to zero landfill.
So again, we're a seasoned company, been around a long time, and we've believed in sustainability for a long time. But as of 2012, just over 10 years ago, we were at a recycling rate of maybe 10%. And so most of our waste was going to landfill. We met as an ownership group, and ironically, it was at a TLMI event where we had some offsite time and time to discuss strategy for the company. And we started talking about legacy as an ownership group. And one of the primary things, if not the primary thing that came up, was a legacy of sustainability that our owners wanted to see for the fifth generation of the company. And that a lot of that came from our spouses who brought a perspective of what their children would like to see, which was really great for us to hear. And we got more engaged with sustainability, and from there really felt that zero landfill was the most tangible sustainability item we could work on. And I would still present that to anybody. There's a whole field of things that you can work on, but I think that's the most tangible for your customers and their story they're trying to tell, your employees and how they act and behave at home and so on. So that's how we got started with the journey, was just being committed as an ownership group.
Yeah, and I that's like, obviously it talks about you as a leader. I mean, a leader, when I always think of leadership, I think of like having a strong and compelling vision and then grounding, I'll say, the organization in core values and principles. And I feel like you're kind of getting a twofer there with sustainability. It's like, this is kind of how we're going to act as an organization. And then here's a very clear and compelling goal and vision. And you knew your starting out metric. I mean, it's pretty, let's not, I guess you can talk about how easy it is to measure, but percentage to landfill. I mean, hey, we're all
Yeah.
dealing with raw materials in, there's a conversion process. And then there's either a sellable product coming out or it's going somewhere else into a waste stream. So can you talk about, I guess, the metrics? You mentioned
Yep.
the zero landfill as that core metric. How easy was it, I guess, to pick that as the metric, and what other kind of metrics do you have in the journey that's kind of defining where you were and how you progressed?
Yeah. So I'll answer that last part second, but the zero to landfill, I would argue that's probably the best path to start with the sustainability journey because it is very measurable. Now we had to figure out measurement techniques. I'm going to make another plug for TLMI. And one of the first steps we took when we said, okay, we're going to go for zero landfill, we didn't know how long that would take. We didn't know how to get there. So we reached out to TLMI members that we knew and knew well and got their help. And it's a great community. And my offer would be the same to any other member or non-member for that matter. Call me and ask, and I'll help guide you on that trip. And that's what we did with a company called Label World, which I believe is now part of WS
Yeah.
up in Rochester. And John McDermott, incredibly helpful, went and visited him. He walked me through the whole process. And all that learning they had over their previous 10 years, they were able to condense and show us, okay, here are the steps you need to go through. So that's incredibly powerful, right? Instead of having to invent it and learn it all yourself, ask someone else. But that metric, they then showed us how they kept track of it, and we started incorporating some of those techniques. And it really is pretty simple, right? I mean, it's how much you're recycling. Your recycler has that information. How much is going to landfill? You get your bill every month of how many tons go to landfill. And then we had to find other avenues like Matrix going for energy, but you get an invoice for that as well. So then we started keeping track of that metric. Now, other metrics, right?
Yeah.
So we're pretty simple. We're keeping track of electrical use and gas use and emissions. We have our own coding operation, so we keep track of emissions off the coder into the atmosphere. And what am I missing? Water use.
Water.
So we started adding all those into the data that we were collecting and work on improvement projects. But zero waste to landfill was definitely the biggest project that we had.
Yeah, but it's interesting that when you look at the metrics, there's the dollar, like you actually have dollars coming in through invoices that you can track, but then, the different unit of measures of the waste, you mentioned weight, and then emissions coming off the process as almost like a processing metric. It was
Yeah,
interesting that you kind of captured all three. Did you start with, which one did you start with? Was it kind of just like dollars and cents in the beginning or weight, and then you kind of evolved into capturing more metrics? Was there a progression of kind of incorporating new metrics over time?
definitely it started with the volumes more than the dollars. So, right, so water, it's in 100 cubic, feet or meters, and, the same for gas usage and really paying attention to that because rates change from your carriers and the dollars get a little convoluted. Of course, you're trying to save money by reducing those volumes, but we've always tracked volume of use right from the beginning and not associated dollars with it. Now, on the landfill side, we've done both because we want to show an ROI because we may have to invest. We have never invested in a baler. That comes up a lot when you're trying to go zero landfill, and that would require saving some money to pay for a baler, perhaps. But we always kept track in case we had to make some investments. Just a quick plug on that. I mean, we are cost neutral based on what we used to send to landfill versus now what we send to energy and so on. It's all cost neutral, and we know that because we keep track of the dollars on that one.
Awesome. Yeah, and I also appreciate the TLMI plug that you made in terms of the collaboration. I'll just say that I do feel that in our industry where people are so willing, yourself, obviously, when you're on this podcast, you've already shared a bunch with me. But just the willingness of some of these converters to just open up the doors, share, where I feel like there's just a lot of building on, the foundation of others, and then the continuous improvement continues to happen. So I just love hearing those stories where people are open and willing to have those conversations. to kind of
It's a
advance it?
it's a fairly unique group in that standpoint, right? I mean, there's not reciprocation asked for. It's like, come on in, I'll show you how we did this.
Hmm.
And I guess it's enough of a fragmented industry that, hey, there's enough competitors out there that you don't compete with day to day, region by region, that you'll find one that willing to share, and it's not going to hurt their business at all.
Yeah, right, for sure. The standards, you look at standard certifications. I mean, there's there's a bunch out there. People could probably get lost in where to start, from either, globally recognized standards like ISO all the way down to, I'll say, more affinity group or trade show or trade association standards. But I guess, can you speak to the different standards landscape that you've come across? What have you kind of gotten involved in, taken ownership with, agreed to comply and take the credit with the actual standard, and just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's a lot more standards out there than I'm aware of, but we're ISO 14001 certified, which we were in 2004. ISO is very procedure driven. It's somewhat metric driven, but more procedure driven, that you have all the proper processes in place that can be audited by a third party. Very good standard, globally recognized. In 2008, we became Life certified, which was a TLMI certification that has since gone away. And what TLMI is now recommending is going through SGP, Sustainable Green Printers, which we've not signed up for. But I think it's very worthy, and they would be very metric driven. Then outside of that, you're seeing more almost desk audit programs coming in from customers like Ecovatus out of Europe, SAQ, Supplier Assurance Quality or Questionnaire, also I believe out of Europe. You're seeing more of these that are very extensive questionnaires that audit. You have to submit evidence of your processes and so on, and they do a desk audit from some other, from Europe, and score you, and then they provide that to an OEM. You're seeing more of that coming right now. I don't think that's as robust as a third-party auditor like ISO 14001, but it is maybe an easier way for a customer to check on a supplier.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're also seeing more, whether it's, involved in either an RFP type process, we're seeing more questions. It's a good sign, right? It means that the procurement side of the house of our end user customers are starting to add this as, a requirement. Hey, check the box, show us that you're engaged in some activity and that you're doing something as an organization. It's being weighted now in the rubric of supplier selection process, which, is a signal of, it's a good signal, obviously.
I think that's a great way. I think, Steve, that's a great way to look at it. Is
Yeah.
It's evolving, it's maturing, and now they're scouting out their supply base more thoroughly.
Yeah, and it's trending. It's trending in the right direction because we're seeing more of it too. So it's like,
Yep.
it's like this push-pull thing. Obviously, you're pushing, like you're from the inside out, principle driven with ownership on board toward a leadership vision and grounded in principle, but which is all great. It's commendable, but it's also nice to hear that the market's also kind of pulling too, and that's good.
Yep.
How is it, I guess, translated out to conversations either up your supply chain with suppliers or downstream to the customer conversations with your customers? How have conversations changed with your customers around the topic? Whether it's, when you're taking a new opportunity in through the request for quote process or an intake form process, or if you're qualifying your own suppliers
Mm-hmm.
as part of your supplier qualification process. Have you seen an evolution on the sustainability front in those types of conversations?
Absolutely, but I would say it's light, right? In the evolution, it's still light, the engagement in both directions. So from our standpoint, we're talking about sustainability with our suppliers all the time, but we don't have demands that they be at certain points. We're starting the conversation with them. It's in our supplier manual, that they recognize the need for that they're supporting our organization, and it's part of our mission. But we haven't put up barriers to being a supplier yet. So that's an evolution we're headed toward. From the customer standpoint, I would say it's somewhat similar in that, like, the top 1% of our progressive customers are now asking about both the products and the company, being us, what are we doing as a company? And we'll report to them, and they want to see improvements, right? Okay, so you have this much emission off your coater. What are you doing to reduce that? What are you doing to get to 0% emissions? And they want to see an action plan. Now, it might take 5 years or whatever, but that's an incredibly progressive group. Similarly, they would ask, hey, if you're sending us polyester labels, what's the post-consumer waste, or the or you have some recycled product in there, what's your goal to get there? So they're putting us on an action plan process, but that's at most 1%. The rest are talking about it. We're presenting to our customers what we're doing. They're very interested, but it's not qualifying yet, right? As they're not qualifying us as being a supplier yet on it.
Right.
But a lot more conversations.
Yeah, no, a lot more conversations for sure. And I guess if there's that, and I'll say an engineering persona at a new prospective customer that's calling you, I have to imagine that for newer business, that might trigger new opportunities where to have those conversations, maybe some legacy stuff like the ship sailed on, the existing product that you've been maybe producing for a while, but on the newer type opportunities that come in the door, can you talk about maybe whether or not your organization has either changed some questions or maybe prompting them to consider something that maybe they didn't consider? So if you're the design engineer contacting your organization, what questions are you challenging them? Like, hey, here's your regular, here's one option, and then here's the sustainable options. Are they reacting to that?
They are and we are doing more of that, right? We're offering alternate solutions that are more sustainable and presenting that. Where it goes from there, I'm not entirely clear, right? I mean, it's still performance based, typically price based somewhat, but those sustainable products are getting more competitive and getting better on performance as well. So, we're making that part of our standard operating procedure to present those things and give that option. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, no, it's good. No, it's all good. I was also thinking about, and this is kind of random, but on the workforce development side, when you talk about recruitment, employees coming in, I like how on your website I saw green DNA. It's like green DNA. I like that phrase, by the way. And I'm just curious, have you heard of on the recruiting process, either bringing employees from GRLabel in the organization, whether or not, they've made reference to that, like, hey, I'm here because, I looked at, these 3 companies and you guys really stood out. Have you been getting some return on investment in terms of on the recruiting side? Everyone's dealing with workforce issues. It's always nice to kind of put some, I'll say, purpose alignment behind the employees as well as the organization. Have you found that Venn diagram actually fits really well from employee to employer around the green DNA?
It does. And I think we've seen that probably for 10 years where employees get drawn to that message and want to come interview for that reason, which is perfect, right? That's exactly where we want to be. And we've really, in the last year or so, put a stake in the ground that we want to associate with customers that have the same vision and employees and suppliers, right? So we keep building on that. It definitely is you can hear it in the interview process that it stood out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's me running through all my questions.
That was quick.
I mean, so John, I know it went pretty quick. Yeah. But I mean, I think it's awesome. And the industry is fortunate to have you in the industry, John, in terms of, the leadership on the committee front and the willingness to share and kind of advancing this stuff. So I really appreciate all that you guys are doing. It's just so cool to kind of peek under the hood and have you share some of that stuff. Is there anything that, I guess before we wrap this up, that you might want to either add or close with, or anything else that you want to kind of just get out that's rolling around in your head?
So this is what happens when you get 2 engineers talking about something that goes quick. We're right on it.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Right.
Right. It took us 10 years to get to zero landfill. So 2023 will be our first year of zero landfill. And in hindsight, 10 years is not that long. While you're going through it, you don't know how long it's going to take. And we did improve every single year. We went to 20%, 30%, right? Just marched right on up. And we knocked down, right, barrier after barrier, which there will be barriers. And that's that's my plug, is you're going to hit roadblocks. How do you store the material? Where do you send it? How do you gather it, like a baler or other techniques? And there's a lot of us in the industry and at TLMI who have been down that path, and that's what you're going to want to reach out for is, okay, I'm at this barrier, how do I get past it? And we'll be able to help.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, John, thanks for
Yeah.
being on. I'm going to stop the recording here, but I appreciate you being on.
Yeah.
And for those listening,
you're welcome.
I'm sure you're going to, yeah. All right. Thanks, John. Thanks.
Yeah.
The Better Products Podcast is about educating product teams about new materials and new technologies, all in the custom material converting and printed electronic space to help them design and build better products. So in this podcast, I'm hoping to get wide-ranging conversations with various people throughout the industry and just bring a lot of good content to the table. So if you're interested in learning more about the industry, materials, processes, how to improve products if you're on a product team, or just general know-how of what the heck is going on in this industry, then subscribe to the podcast and get ready for some more really good episodes as I bring in some great guests. Thanks.